All right, folks, we have made it to Friday. Congratulations and welcome aboard the Steve Malzberg Show. In just a moment, we'll be joined by Congressman Ed Royce, chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Relations and former chairman of the House Subcommittee on Terrorism. And we're going to have a lot to talk about with him regarding ISIS and the president's speech and John Kerry's statements yesterday on a war. Is it a war or not a war? Also, throughout the course of the show, we're going to be talking also about the situation with Ray Rice. I don't know if you're aware of the fact that the Baltimore Ravens, Ray Rice's old team, the team he was on, played last night on Thursday Night Football on CBS. Two main takeaways from that. CBS opened up the broadcast with a lecture to men on how to treat women. That's number one. Number two, did you see all the women wearing Ray Rice jerseys at the stadium, in the parking lot, before the game, tailgating at the game, and proud to talk about it on air? We'll talk about all that in the course during the course of the show. But right now, Congressman Ed Royce, I want us to first watch this.
In an interview with CNN, Kerry insists the U.S. is not at war with ISIS.
I think that's the wrong terminology. What we are doing is engaging in a very significant counterterrorism operation. And it's going to go on for some period of time. If somebody wants to think about it as being a war with ISIL, they can do so. But the fact is, it's a major counterterrorism operation that will have many different moving parts.
All right, well, let me go, because if at least I got permission that if I want to think of it as a war, I can do so. So that's something. Joining us now, as promised, is Congressman Ed Royce, a Republican from the great state of California, chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Relations and former chair of the House Subcommittee on Terrorism, Nonproliferation, and Trade. Welcome, Congressman.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. Good to be with you.
Well, thank you. All right. You know, when you hear that, the day after Obama, you know, compared to what he had said in the past, gets tough. And even gets the support to a large extent, you know, of the leader of the House and most Republicans in general. I mean, to come out and say no, it's not a war. Is it a war?
Well, there's no doubt that that ISIS or ISIL now, as they keep expanding their ambitions, so soon they'll just be the Islamic State. They obviously have declared war on the United States, on the capitals of Europe. Frankly, they've laid out not just their jihadist agenda with their manifesto, but they're taking action. They're beheading Americans. They're training recruits and telling us that they're going to send them back. And the leader of their organization, when he was once in custody, when he got out, what did he tell us? He said, "See you in New York City."
Right.
We know what he meant by that. Yeah, he's waging war on us, and so the reality is that we're going to have to figure out how to take away the safe haven where he's training all these new recruits.
So by your definition, if the president does what he said he would do the other night, will we be at war with ISIS? Are we at war with ISIS?
Well, we're I don't know what else you call it. The fact is that they're targeting Americans, and in a situation like that, you've got to respond. And the question is, why haven't we responded until now? Why did it take 7 months of our embassy in Baghdad asking for airstrikes and for armed drone hits on ISIL as they were traversing across the border from Syria into Iraq, and city by city, taking each of these cities without us hitting them from the air? They were very easy targets. You know, their black flags were flying. You could just see them from the drones and the spy planes moving across that desert. We urged action. I think many in the Pentagon urged action. Certainly our embassy did repeatedly. And this administration has waited and waited until they're flush with cash, flush with heavy weapons by taking Mosul, taking the central bank, and now we're finally seeing some response. But it is really late in the game, having had them double their recruits. Did you hear the report last night on the new estimate of how many fighters they have?
Over 30,000 fighters, correct?
So they've doubled the numbers, and that's through the recruiting. And that's the other part we should be talking about, is how do you curtail these foreign fighters? I would suggest that a big part of it is having enough gumption to hit these guys hard. Remember that first Gulf War? I think there were over 130,000. There were let me see if I can remember the numbers. There were 42 regiments out there, 3,700 tanks, Iraqi tanks. This had to do with the invasion of Kuwait in the first Gulf War. We started in with the air power, and by the time the U.S. was done, we had knocked out 3,700 tanks, 10,000 trucks, and decimated those divisions. Now, in this case, you look at the paltry effort that's been put into play so far in terms of retarding the advances that ISIL has made on the field, and add to that the requests we've had from the Kurdish, who have these men and women in battalions up there fighting without the anti-tank missiles, artillery, or long-range mortars that they've told us repeatedly they need. And we've drug our feet on that until now. So, now's the time to give those Kurdish forces, Iraqi security forces, other Arab forces on the ground, the weapons they need. Now's the time to tell the Saudis and Kuwaitis, you're going to pay for this. You've got to pick up the tab, just like during the first Gulf War. This is your necks on the line. You need to pay for this. And now is the time, to appeal to NATO and tell NATO it's not the United States alone that's going to do the airstrikes. And I understand the French have come forward. I think the Australians are coming forward. But we need an international effort here, like in that first Gulf War, to suppress this threat.
We've sold the Saudis really sophisticated aircraft as far as fighting machines. Why can't they put a couple in the sky as well?
And why not some divisions on the ground? Now, they have come forward and they've said, all right, we're going to pay, to train Arab fighters, the ones that are fighting ISIL right now. You can do it on our bases. We'll pay for all of that. U.S. Expertise, our Central Intelligence Agency, our special forces will be training and showing these fighters how to offset what ISIL has learned from the Chechnyan officers that have trained them. But the other aspect is that those training sites that ISIL is using that exist on that Syrian-Iraq border, they're bringing young men in there from all over the world. Half of their fighters, more than half, are from overseas. And we need to target that. We need to go in there and blow that to smithereens and remove their base of operations there, and we need to target their command and control, because what these young men who are watching need to see is the consequences of taking on not just the United States but the international community, and what that looks like in terms of absolute defeat. And to do that, we need the resolve that they're going to be defeated.
Right.
So that's important.
And that'll be a big deterrent, as you said. What's next here? Well, I mean, the president isn't going to do anything, because even though he says he doesn't need congressional approval, he wants congressional approval. I keep hearing reports. First of all, are you on board, and are most Republicans, do you believe, on board with arming these Syrian rebels again? How on earth do you vet them? We know that a lot of them are Al-Qaeda. We could see how we got, screwed, if you will, in Libya with the people we supported to a great extent. Now we're going to do it in Syria, just give these people U.S. arms and tell them to go fight for us when we don't even know who they are? How's that going to work?
Well, I think what we're doing is separating the al-Nusra brigades from the old Free Syrian Army. Now, as the president quipped, they're a bunch of pharmacists and doctors,
right,
and, civil society guys. Yes, they are, but that means they do need training. And they're hanging on, they're holding on to Aleppo. The ones we're talking about are holding on to Aleppo right now. And from one side, they've got Assad, sending in the barrel bombs on them and opening up with the artillery. And from the other side, they've got ISIL carrying out attacks, trying to take them over. So the concept is to get them the weaponry they need on the ground and the kind of training they need. There is a large group of Sunnis who lived in the cities, who right now are part of that giant diaspora that really can't stand ISIL and won't live under Assad, and they represent a ground force that can tie down ISIL there in Syria. On the other hand, or the other side of that border, you've got the Kurdish Peshmerga forces, and what's unique there, they've got a lot of women in these battalions, and you've probably heard the stories out of the region that we have too. that the ISIL fighters don't like to take on these women
Right.
because they think if they get killed in battle by a female, they won't necessarily go to paradise. But these women are good fighters. The Kurdish men that serve in these Peshmerga battalions, the only problem they have is that they don't have the heavy weapons. They don't have the anti-tank missiles they need against the equipment ISIL is pulling up there, and they don't have the artillery. And their foreign minister communicated to me maybe 2 weeks ago now that this was costing him men and women on the battlefield. If they only had that equipment, they could check the advances of ISIL. So now we've got a plan here that Republicans have been suggesting this for quite a while, as you know. Now we've got a plan where we're going to go forward with equipping them, with stiffening the resolve, working with the Sunni tribes again, bringing back some of our expertise with some of our intelligence officers to rally them. They don't like the massacres that are occurring because ISIL, when it takes over a village, has this absolutist position that everybody who's an apostate gets killed. Well, that's a lot of the Sunnis too.
And the women are, of course, taken into slavery, et cetera. Congressman, I really appreciate your candor and your analysis, and thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Steve.
Thank you. That's Congressman Ed Royce, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. And we'll talk about this and more when we return with the Malzberg panel. Coming up next. Don't go away.